don't talk about my grandfather that much because he died a while ago. I mean, I was like in middle school, but I wanted to sort of remember him. His yard site's actually in Peshawar, but his birthday is in December, and my family loves to celebrate birthdays. So on my grandfather and my grandmother's birthday, both of whom are no longer alive, we like do something special as a family. So his birthday was last week, and I sort of wanted to like take this moment to remember him. He was born in New York. He spent most of his life there. He then applied to medical school in psychology, and was actually rejected from every medical school in the United States on the account of the fact that he was Jewish, including my alma mater, University of Maryland. So he went to Nova Scotia, Canada, and he got his degree there, and then came back to New York to do his fellowship, where he met my grandmother at the hospital they were working for. And they got engaged, and then they sort of set their wedding date, and then he got his draft notice for World War II. So he took a train down to DC and like literally begged this officer if he could have like 3 days extra to get, because the wedding date was 3 days after he was supposed to be called up, and so he literally got 3 days, and the guy was like, okay, fine, and then he looked at me and goes, how about an extra day for the honeymoon? And he was like, don't push it. So they had their wedding, and they immediately went to Texas for my grandfather to do basic training, and then he went off to China, India, Burma. He had a long tradition of writing letters. He also loved writing rhyming poems, which he wrote my grandmother on a regular basis. And he did, obviously, come back from World War II. And he started his own practice for psychology for disease patients on Long Island. And I actually remember when my dad explained to me about what my grandfather did, because my dad is an endocrinologist, he's a medical doctor, and I said, what kind of a doctor is Grandpa? And he said, he's a therapist, he's a psychologist, he talks with people, and I didn't understand that. And my dad tried to explain it to me, and the only image I had in my head was a guy in a full body cast on in the hospital, and my grandfather would go into the hospital and talk with them, and then they could remove the cast. And then he was totally better. And I was like, wow, my grandfather's magical. Which, to a certain extent, I kind of still believe is like, I mean, the way the therapists and psychologists help people is like very healing. So, but that was my impression of him as a young child. I knew my grandfather as someone who would always wake up early. He went to Minion on a fairly regular basis. And whenever we were visiting, he would walk to Minion. He loved walking. And then he would stop off at the McDonald's and get pancakes in the true Chipkin tradition that we wouldn't really cook. We would just go out and buy pancakes, and he would bring them back, and we would all eat them as like family in the morning whenever we visited them in Florida. He was the epitome of easygoing, and he would follow my grandmother and his family around wherever they went, including to every yard sale, wherever my grandmother wanted to go. And we saw it a bit actually after my grandmother died, that my grandfather started doing all these things that we didn't realize he did. Like he would eat these foods at dinner, and we're like, we didn't think you liked those foods. And he was like, well, your grandmother didn't like them, so I didn't eat them, but I always really loved them. And so like from that I always learned, like, there's, you know what, there's some things you really love and you want to fight for, and there's certain things, like, you know what, other people love them, so you can, it's going to be okay. I also remember sort of my grandfather, and I always attribute this quote to him, that he would always say, the right decision is the one that you make. And that he was a big believer of thinking and weighing and analyzing decisions, and then once you sort of carefully calculate that decision, you made it and you ran with it, and that you don't regret so much because that was a decision you'd made and you thought about it, and that was it, and it was going to be the right decision because you had made it. So, thank you very much for listening, and have a great afternoon.